This is the review of 12.4 and 12.5. So we are factoring here on the front. This is 12.4. We don't have a coefficient in front of the squared term. And so it's a little bit easier. We don't have to try and use so many trial and error things. So we can just look at the third term, think about the factors of it, and then just figure out which factors add or subtract depending on the positives and negatives up to the middle term. So we already know it's just going to be an x and an x up front. And then from there, we're just looking at 16 and thinking about what multiplies to that. So 8 times 2 does. So if I put an 8 and a 2 here, I would end up with a 16 as my third term, and I'd have an x squared here. But 8 and 2 would add up to a 10x in the middle. So 16 and 1 is not going to get us to 8 either. And so the only other one for whole numbers is 4 times 4. So this is plus 4 and plus 4. We can rewrite that as x plus 4 squared. Now, one clue on this that we don't have any negative numbers is that we have two plus signs here. So every time we see two plus signs, like when we come down to number 5, we automatically know it's going to go plus and plus. So number 2, when I take a look at this one, I see a negative on the product, so what they're multiplying to, and that means that one's going to be a plus and one's going to be a minus. So it's going to be p plus something and p minus, and you can flip-flop those. The minus can go here and the plus can go here. But I know I have one of each because when they multiply, they create a negative. Now they're adding up to a positive, so that just means out of my two numbers, the positive is going to have the greater absolute value or be the bigger number in a way. So 27, I'm thinking 9 and 3, and sure enough, 9 and 3 will make a 6. So since it needs to be a positive 6, I need the big 9 to be positive and the little 3 to be negative, and then the 3 will come off the 9 to create a 6. Number 3. This one, look at your positives and negatives. They're multiplying to a positive, but they're adding to a negative. So when that happens, we know it's two negatives, because a negative times another negative will give you that positive, and they're going to add up to a negative, though. So with 6, you could think 2 and 3, but they're not going to add up to 7. And so this one's going to be a 6 and a 1. 6 times 1 is 6. And then you've got that negative 7 that they're going to add up to. All right, number 4. Again, a 6. Now, 2 positives means it's k plus and k plus. So it wouldn't be a 6 and a 1 because if you added them together, you're going to get 7. Now, a 6 and a 1 looks like it could make a 5 if we had a negative. But because of these plus signs, we know we don't have a negative. They're multiplying to a positive. The only way that could happen with negatives is if there was 2 negatives. And then 2 negatives would add up to a negative. And so since this is adding up to a positive, I know they're positives. So now we're looking at different factors of 6, not 6 and 1. It would be 2 and 3. And it doesn't matter where you put those. If you put the 3 here and the 2 here, it's not going to make a difference. So 2 times 3 is 6. 2 plus 3 is 5. Number 5, again, 2 plus signs. So it's v plus, v plus. 80, I'm thinking 10 times 8. And sure enough, they will add up to 18. So that's perfect. 6, multiplying to a positive, but adding to a negative. That's 2 negatives. And 50, I think 25 and 2 or 10 times 5. And since they have to add up to 15, 10 and 5 is going to be the right one. Both negative, multiplying to a positive, adding to negative 15. Number 7, multiplying to a negative. So I'm going to have one of each here, v plus and v minus. 39, I'm thinking 13 times 3. And with 13 times 3, I can get to a 10. It needs to be a positive 10, so the bigger number needs to be the positive, so 13. And 3 multiplies to negative 39, and the negative 3 will come off the 13 to create a positive 10. Number 8, negative and a negative. Well, if the product's negative, we know only one of these is going to be negative, because when you multiply, you need a positive and a negative. And my first instinct when I see 88 is to think 11 times 8. It's one of those 11 numbers. And when I look at those, they're 3 apart. And so we can definitely do this. We can get this to a negative 3. Since it's negative, you take the bigger number and make that one the negative. Put the other one here. Negative 11 plus 8 is negative 3, and when you multiply, you're going to get negative 88. All right, down to the bottom, we're going to go ahead and solve these by factoring. So if you read the directions there, it says you can use the quadratic formula to check your answers, but on the test, if you just do quadratic formula, you're not going to get credit. Okay, we're not testing quadratic formula. We've already done that in previous chapters. You need to solve these, show your work by factoring. So we need to factor this. Looking at this, I've got a negative and a negative. Again, still not dealing with a coefficient up here. So all I need to do is look at these two. I don't need to think any further than that. Since they're multiplying to a negative, I know it's going to be a positive and a negative. 24 is one of those that's got a lot, right? 12 times 2, 8 times 3, 6 times 4. So the only ones that are 2 apart are 6 and 4. And since it needs to be negative, the bigger number needs to be negative. So 6 and 4, double check it, multiplies to negative 24. And negative 6 plus 4 is negative 2. Okay, perfect. So now to solve this, it's very easy. You just set each one of these equal to 0. You could do this mentally. What number plus 4 is 0? It's negative 4. What number minus 6? It's going to give you 0. That would just be 6. So the answer is going to be negative 4 and 6. Again, the reason is because if I plug those in, I create a 0, and then it doesn't matter what it creates on the other side, because when you multiply 0 times anything, you get 0. So these make this equation true. If you can't look at it and just figure it out, just set it equal to 0. P plus 4 equals 0. And then just solve it. Minus 4 to clear it out. P equals negative 4. P minus 6 equals 0. Add 6. And P equals 6. All right, and then number 10. Same idea, looking at 56, I think 8 and 7, it's all positives. 8 and 7 will add up to 15. So we have R plus 8, R plus 7 equals 0. So we're all factored out here. Set them equal to 0 and solve. So minus 8, R equals negative 8, minus 7, R equals negative 7. So R equals negative 8 and negative 7. The order that you list those does not matter. Now on the test, once you've done that, if you really want to double check your work, if you don't trust that you've done the factoring correct for whatever reason, you could run quadratic formula with A and B and C, and it will produce the same answers. And if it doesn't, you know something's wrong. But more than likely, you're going to actually mess up your quadratic formula more often than you're going to mess up your factoring. So it's up to you if you want to try to use that as a check. You absolutely can. But as long as these two multiply to this and add up to this, your factoring is going to be good to go. Okay, on to the back now. A little more difficult. Now we're on to 12.5. So now we have to deal with this leading coefficient. And so we have to put that into our binomials and consider what that number does to the other factors. So it's a 5. And so the only way to make a 5 through multiplication of whole numbers is 5 times 1. So I can just do 5x and x, and I don't need to consider any other combinations. So that's nice. Now with 12, I've got a lot of different combinations. 12 and 1, 6 and 2, 4 and 3. And so when I consider those, I have to consider that one of these is going to sit in this spot. And when I expand this, or simplify it, I should say, it's going to get multiplied by the 5. And so one of the two factors gets multiplied by 5. And in this case, the other one is going to stay the same because it'll get times by 1. Sometimes we have another number here and that gets times as well, and then it gets really complicated. But one of them's times by 5, one of them's not, and then they get added together. So I just kind of start looking at these, and I'm going to multiply each one by 5, and then look at the other number and see if I can get to an 11. So I'll start with the 4 and the 3. If I do 5 times 4, it's 20. A 3 doesn't get me back to 11. 5 times 3 is 15, and a 4 does get me back to 11. So I think I got lucky, and that's going to be the magic number. So it's 4 and 3. The 3 needs to get times by the 5, so I get 15. The 4 needs to get times by the x. That can get me back to 11, and it's positive 11. So I need the 15 to be positive. So the 5 times the 3 needs to create a positive 15, and I need the 4 to be negative, so I get a negative 4x. You can expand this if you need to see it to double check yourself. So 5 times x is 5x squared. Then you're going to get positive 15x and negative 4x. And that was the trick there. That's going to be the 11x. And then, of course, we get negative 12 out here. number 12. Got a leading coefficient. One other thing I forgot, you got to always check and make sure that that can't be factored out at the beginning. Sometimes you can just take out that one number from all three. Couldn't do it here, can't do it here. Looking ahead, I don't see any on this review sheet that happens, so we don't really need to worry about that here. So the only way to make a 3 with whole number factors is a 3 and a 1. Makes our life kind of easy. When I see 25, I'm thinking 5 and 5. It could be 25 and 1 as well. But more than likely, I think it's going to be 5 and 5. So since they're both 5s, it doesn't matter where you're going to put these. But just before we write it in, just think about what's going to happen. You're going to multiply 3 times 5, that's 15. And then you're going to have 5 here. 15 and 5 can make 10, so we're good. It's 5 and 5. Now we need it to be a positive 10, so we need the big 15. Now don't just think in terms of the 5s, but what are you multiplying? The 15 and the 5. I need the 15 to be positive and the 5 to be negative to bring me back down to 10. So I need the plus sign here to make a positive 15 and the negative 5 here to give me that negative 5, and that will get me back to 10. Okay, 13. Again, a 3, so it's 3x and x, factors of 20, 4 and 5, 10 and 2. So one of them gets times by 3, and then the other one is trying to get me back to 19. So if I do 4 times 3, that's 12, plus 5, not going to get me to 19, but 3 times 5 is 15, and then with the 4, I can get to 19. So I need the 3 and the 5 to be multiplied together. I'm going to put the 5 right here. That would put the 4 right here. This is all positive, so we should be able to just drop positives in here. Double check yourself. 15x and 4x will make 19x. And of course, up front, you're going to get your 3x squared. And in the back, you're going to get the 20. So this is good to go. 14, you got a coefficient of 2. So that's going to be a 2x and an x. With a 15, I'm thinking 5 times 3. One of them is going to get times by 2. So if I do 5 times 2, that's 10. And then with a 3, I don't get to 11. So try the other one. 2 times 3 is 6. And with 5, I can get to 11. So the 2 needs to be multiplied by the 3. I'm going to drop the 3 in there, so they will get multiplied together. The 5 will go here. They're multiplying to a positive 15, and they're adding to a negative. That means I've got 2 negatives. Negative times a negative is positive, but we'll get a negative 6 and a negative 5, which will add up to negative 11. Okay, 15 now. More to consider because now that I have a coefficient of 4 up front, it could be 4v times v, but if that doesn't work for any of my combinations, it could be a 2v times a 2v, because 2 times 2 makes the 4, and a 4 times a 1 makes a 4. Now the nice thing is here I have a 4 in this spot, so my only options are 4 times 1 or 2 times 2. All right, we got to get to a 17. So I'm going to start off with the 2 times 2. If I did 4 times 2, that's 8. And then my other 2 is not going to get me to 17. But I think this 4 will do it, because a 4 times a 4 would be 16. And then a 1 gets me to 17. So I need to put the 4 here. So I get a 4 times a 4. And the 1 here. And then they're both pluses because all I have is plus signs. And then just double check yourself. 4 times 4. 16v, and then a 1v, that'll make 17v. The 1 times 4 makes a 4. And so I considered that I might have to get this far, but in this case, I didn't have to. If you had started with this one, you would try out the 4 and the 1 and the 2 and the 2, and then when you realize that it hasn't worked yet, then you're going to go try the other one. There's really no way to know ahead of time which one's going to work. You can kind of just look at the numbers before you put too much on your page, but it's kind of just guessing and checking. 16. Again, a 4, so it could be a 4v and a v, or a 2v and a 2v. So it's just a 3 and a 1, so that's nice. Got to get to an 8. 4 times 3 is 12. 1 doesn't get me back to 8. 4 times 1 is 4. 3 doesn't get me to 7. So actually, I've eliminated this one now. And so it's going to be a 2 times 3 is a 6, and a 1 times 2 is a 2, and the 6 and the 2 will get me to the 8. Now, it doesn't really matter where on this specific problem where I put the 3 and the 1. Because if I put the 3 here, it's going to get times by 2. If I put the 3 here, it's going to get times by 2. They're both going to get times by 2. So it doesn't matter where you put them in this problem. They're multiplying to a positive, 1 times 3, but they're adding to a negative. That means they're both negative. So this would create a negative 6. This would create a negative 2. And together that creates a negative 8. And I wrote V, but it's P, obviously. Not important. 17. All right, I got a 6 now. So it could be a 6b times b to create the 6b squared, or it's a 2 times 3. So 2b times 3b. Now the simpler of those two would be here. So I'm going to start there and hope that's where it's at, but it could end up over here. And with 20, I've got a lot of different options I need to try. I'm going to ignore 20 and 1 for now because we're going to end up multiplying by 6 or 2 or 3. And so I don't think the 20 is going to work. But it could be a 10 times 2 or a 4 times 5 is my guess. One of those two. So we're going to multiply these each by 6 and see if the other one, which would be times by 1, gets us to 19 somehow. So 6 times 4 would be 24, and then 5 would get me to 19. So I like that. I kind of got lucky there right off the bat. So 6 times 4 is what I want. Drop the 4 right here. That's 24. 5 times b is 5, and 24 and 5 can get me here. Just got to put my negative in the right spot. I need my bigger number to be negative, not between the 4 and the 5, but after multiplication. So I need that big 24 to be negative. So I'm going to put it on the 4. So I get a 6 times negative 4 to get negative 24, and a positive 5 brings me right back to negative 19. So I got really lucky there. Pretty much the first thing I tried worked. Doesn't always happen. Okay, 18. Again, a 6. So it's 6b times b, or potentially 2b times 3b. 20 again. So we got 10 and 2, 4 and 5. I'll start over here again. I got to get to a 23. So 6 times 4 would be 24, and 5 won't get me there. 6 times 5 would be 30, and 4 can't get me here. So what about 10? 6 times 10 is 60. Nope, that ain't going to work. 6 times 2 is 12, and 10 does not get me to 23. You could try 20 and 1. 6 times 20, obviously way too big, and 6 times 1 is 6, and 20 is not going to get me to here. So I've eliminated this whole side. So it worked great over here, and it didn't work over here. So now I got to go try something over here. I'll start with the 4 and the 5. 2 times the 4 would be 8, and 3 times the 5 would be 15. 15 and 8, if you need to write them out, but 15 and 8 can make a 23. So that's my magic number there. So I got the 8 by doing 2 times 4, which means the 4 needs to go here. So the 2 gets multiplied by the 4. And I got the 15 by multiplying the 5 times the 3. So again, remember, 2 times the 3 got me the 6 here. 5 times the 4 got me the 20 here. And when I multiplied 2 times 4 and 5 times 3, they're going to add up to 23. Now I got to place my negatives, but if you take a look, they're multiplying to a positive, adding to a negative. That means I've just got 2 negatives. So negative 8, negative 15 get me to negative 23. All right, 19. Now we're going to do the same thing, but we are going to solve them at the end. So I've got a 3. That's nice. Only got to check one option, 3v times v. And I got an 8, so I'm going to try 4 times 2. If that doesn't work, I'll do 8 times 1. So I got to get to a 10. 3 times 4, that's 12. And then you're going to have 2. That looks like it could get me to a 10, but I've got all positives. Those would have to be added together, and that's not going to work. So what if I did 3 times the 2 instead and got 6 and added the 4? That can get me to 10. So that's going to work. So I need the 3 times the 2, and I need the 4 here. Because this is all plus signs, I can't put any negatives in here. So it's got to be plus and plus equals 0. Check yourself one time. There's your 6. There's your 4. They add up to 10. 4 times 2 gets me 8. 3 times v gets me 3. I'm good. So now I just set these equal to 0 and solve them, and I'm all set. So minus 4. 3v equals negative 4. Divide by 3. Okay, so v equals negative 4/3. Leave it as a fraction. Minus 2 over here. V equals negative 2. Those are my two solutions. You could run it through quadratic formula. That's your A, your B, your C, and you could double check those answers. And 20. I like 7 up front because the only way to make a 7 is 7 times 1. So I don't have too many options to try. I don't love that 48. It could be 12 times 4. It could be 6 times 8. I'm going to go with the more common 6 times 8 to start with and see if I can get to a 34. So 7 times 6, that would be 42. If I take 8 off of 42, I can get to 34. So I got lucky and hit it on my first shot. So I need 7 times 6 to make 42, and I need 8 right here. To get to a negative 34, look, only one's going to be negative, so I got to place my positives and negatives correctly here. I need a negative 34, so I need my big number, which is the 42, because you're comparing 42 and 8. I need the big 42 to be negative, so the negative's got to go on the 6, so I get negative 42. Positive 8 gets me back to negative 34. All right, I'm all set. Just run these equal to 0, and we're all set. So minus 8, and divide. So v equals negative 8/7. Add the 6, and v equals 6.